Hey, what's going on, guys? I just wanted to do a review of the Medford Viper and just show off a few of the knives in my collection. These are the Vipers that I've been able to acquire. The last two right here I've acquired very recently. I saw them actually pop up and I just kind of had to have them because they looked amazing. But I've seen a lot of people doing videos and a lot of people like myself that don't have a lot of experience reviewing knives. But I have used knives for quite some time, and I just wanted to go over kind of my impressions of the knife. This knife I have carried a lot, and I've carried it to work. I've carried it outside. So I'm going to do a full review, in comparison to the other flippers that I've carried. So just to give you a quick background, if you haven't seen my other videos, I've been collecting knives for quite some time. Wouldn't call myself a true knife collector per se, but I do like nice knives. And I have gravitated recently towards the flippers, and I mean, in the last, 6 years, 7 years, like everybody else. And I did find something special in the Medford line as a whole. I liked it. I really enjoyed the designs that Greg was doing. So I decided to get the Viper just because it was a flipper. And I'll tell you, obviously, I really liked it because I acquired these two as well. But we'll go over that. But just to give you a quick size comparison, the new ones are actually a little bit lighter because they've got some material taken out. They've got a fuller here, and they actually have some, I think, material, a smaller amount of material in them. So I think these knives are under 10 ounces, maybe on the 9-ounce side. And this knife here, the one I carried, you notice it doesn't have the fuller, and it might, it's just a little bit bigger, just weighed about 10 ounces. So these are probably around an ounce lighter if you're concerned about that sort of thing. But just to give you a comparison, this is a knife I carried before I got into Medfords every day. It's a Kirby Lambert. It is I think it's called a Snap, and it runs on IKBS, but it weighs about 5.5 ounces, if I'm not mistaken on that. So obviously the Medford is quite a bit larger, but for me, while it was noticeably larger, it wasn't like a deal breaker. It wasn't like I couldn't carry it. Going from this knife to this knife, you didn't notice it, but it's 6 ounces, 10 ounces. So that just gives you a frame of reference. Another knife I carried quite a bit is this. This is called a Wilson Combat. It's a mid-tech from Les George. It's called the Eagle. And this one is really light. This is about 4 ounces, and I carried this one, and it's very slim. So it's kind of the opposite of the Viper line. So I'll kind of compare that. And then another knife I carried quite a bit is this Les George. It's called a Rockeye. And just to show you a size comparison there, about the same size. And I think the Rockeye, this one, I have about 3 different Rockeyes, and they all weigh different amounts. But this is actually one of the lightest Rockeyes, and it weighs somewhere around 6.5 ounces, just to give you an idea. And one of the Rockeyes that I have, so I don't know if the material is a little bit different, was a little bit over 7.5 ounces. So they did fluctuate, but that's the lineup, and that's what we'll be comparing to. I have carried all of these knives except for these two brand new ones here. So let's just do a quick review. I know a lot of people don't like the Medford line for whatever reason, and I want to do a pretty honest review. I know, since I have a lot of Medford stuff, I know people buy these knives and they want to do these reviews and they go like, oh my god, everything's amazing. They want to justify the money that they spent. But I'll give you the honest opinion of these things. So first of all, it is heavy. If you can get over the hump of it being a heavy knife, I think they're amazing. So I wanted a big, heavy, overbuilt knife. Just to give you an idea, I think this iPhone here, then this is the smaller one. I'm filming on the bigger one. I think the small one weighs around 5-6 ounces, and I think the larger one is 7-8 ounces, if I'm not mistaken. You can look that up. So these knives are a little bit heavier than an iPhone Plus. So that just gives you a comparison of what kind of weight you're carrying around. I appreciated the thickness of the knife. That's kind of one of those things. I'm going to actually move these out of the way here. But I like the thickness. So I started, actually, the first Medford I bought was a Praetorian Tie, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. It felt good. It felt like something that I've never felt before. So I actually like the thick knife. So when I saw the Vyper at the shop, I'm like, I got to try that. And it didn't flip this nice. It did have to break in for sure, but I decided to buy it and carry it. So a couple things that I noticed. First of all, the Praetorian tie, and actually let me grab that. The Praetorian tie, let's see the comparison size here. They're about the same width, but the Praetorian is actually quite a bit larger. I believe that Praetorian weighs 12 ounces, I think, something 11, 12 ounces. So, while this is a very cool knife, obviously, it's just a little bit different than a flipper. So the one thing I'll say is the Praetorian ties have a really nice clip on them that supports that weight. So while you do feel a lot of weight, and you do feel that it's heavy, it in the pocket, that wide clip kind of disperses the weight. I'm not a huge fan of these old, I think they're called popsicle style clips. I think they look cool, and I think they're grabby as hell, but all of that weight comes to that point right here. So certainly it feels a lot heavier, in my opinion, when you're actually carrying the knife. And while the Praetorian tie is big, and I feel like I bump into things, so my pocket will hit something and it'll let you know it's there. When you're walking, this will let you know it's there because you kind of have all that weight right there. So you're not gonna forget you have a knife on you, basically. As opposed to something like this just disappears in your pocket. And that's pretty much the same clip here. In the Lambert, the same thing. You put it in. Now the Lambert's actually pretty thick as well, so I guess I had an advantage. It's not that thick though, because I was used to carrying this every day. So when I switched to the Vyper, it actually, I had no problems with it. I thought it was a interesting switch. I carried around for the first couple days. It actually sat in the pocket so it didn't bump things like the tie. The Praetorian would bump desks and tables and cars and things like that more, but this guy actually settled really well into the pocket. Now, the only issue I had with the pocket is it went really deep into the pocket. So and this is the same issue I have with the Rockeye. Whereas if you've got a set of keys in there, you can see the keys sit at the bottom. The keys will be touching the bottom of this knife. So if that annoys you, metal on metal clicking or something like that, that would be a deal breaker, because I keep my keys in my front right pocket as well, and they were clicking against this. So you just kind of have to get used to it. There's nothing you can do about it. That's it's physics right there. So you could switch the key pocket, but I just got used to it and it was no big deal. So one of the things I found really, really, really interesting about this knife is, in other flippers, and I think this is every other flipper I've ever seen, well, every other folding knife really, the lockup is right here, where the either the frame or the lock engages with the blade to keep it out there. So the Vyper's a little bit different design. You can see it's fully rounded right here, so that's totally unique. The lockup is actually on this thing that sticks out, so it's on the flipper tab. So that's pretty unique. You can see that the scale engages that flipper tab right out here, and so it's just got a pretty unique lockup, which gives it a very unique design. So when you're looking at this, the first thing it reminded me, I collect Colt single action armies. I'm like, yeah, that looks like a hammer for a Colt single action army revolver. So I thought it was cool right off the get-go. But the lockup, rock solid as you'd expect. I have so many Medfords now, and I have not had any of them have any sort of rock, blade play, whatever. These things are solid. So yeah, that it honestly kind of feels like it's indestructible. I know it's not, but that's the way it feels. So it engages with the flipper. So like every single Medford, you have to get to know the knife. It's not intuitive. This knife, intuitive, just pops right out. Okay, anyone can use it. This knife, the first time someone flips it, they're not going to flip it all the way. You have to get used to this knife, and I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I like it, you know. I just happen to kind of, that's why I collect knives. I don't want them to disappear on me. I want to know that they're there. If I spend that kind of money on a knife, it's almost like a toy to me, and it's not like a, oh, by the way, I have a knife. It's just a tool that I'm going to use to cut thread or something. No, it's like a toy, and I want to know it's there, and I want to play with it, and you know, I want to get to know it. So, you know, you have to give this knife wrist when it's new. So you can do a couple things. You can either press it down and give it wrist, because when you press it down, it ain't going to go all the way. But what I do is I actually give it wrist and kind of let the momentum press it down, and then it just swings out pretty easily. So then you actually don't have to give it a lot of fingers. So actually your finger here, just kind of put a little pressure, flip it out, and then bam, right there. And you heard that little click right there. That's I'll talk about that. So if you're in the vertical, which everyone knows who collects flippers is the hardest, you can't just use that. There's no way. You actually have to go onto the lock face to get all that the momentum down, and even there, couldn't even do it. So this knife requires wrist, and you have to have technique and put some wrist into it. It is running on washers, as you guys probably know. So and when you, the knife, this is a 270. It's a big heavy blade, so it flips different. Like this one, I can just barely tap it and it goes out because it's aiming down and gravity's going to help it. Versus if you have it up like this, you really got to swing it out or give it wrist, or you know, you have to be conscious of that because there's just so much weight. It's not like this Kirby Lambert. So it's funny. Even this Les George here, and this is a big knife, and the blade is really light, even though it's a little bit thicker. But I can flick it with my pinky of my opposite hand, and it just rockets out. It just, I mean, these ones actually, it's almost impossible to misfire them. I mean, so if you want a flipper, and both of these run on bearings, they just have a totally different feel to them. But the Viper just, it feels like a Sebenza for smoothness, but everything's double. You know, double the size, double the weight, double everything, and so therefore it's a little bit slower. So if you guys have a Sebenza and you flick a Sebenza, you know, you can definitely tell it's not on bearings, it's on washers. So that's what I get out of this one as well. So other than that, this is a really beautiful, it's kind of blue anodized. It's a really awesome knife. It's a big knife, and it's aggressive. It's an aggressive knife. And actually, when I first got the knife, I went to sharpen it on my Wicked Edge, as I do with all the knives I'm going to carry. I like them razor sharp. And it's, I don't know if it's the blade design. You can see I just didn't open it up there. But if it's the blade design, but the Wicked Edge got this thing razor sharp. I'm talking sharper than I've ever seen a knife. I have no idea. So this thing was scary. So if I were to kind of sum up the Viper, I would say the knife is aggressive. It's aggressive regarding you know, just kind of the shape, the design, the look of it. But I mean, you look at this 270 blade, but it really comes down to a really nasty, nice point there. So if you were to drop this thing on your foot, there is no doubt, I mean, that thing might go all the way through your shoe, your foot, and everything, but either way, you are going to the hospital. So I actually was on the Wicked Edge, and I just barely nicked my finger, and I'll tell you that it was a little tough to get the bleeding to stop there. So you know, it's an aggressive knife. You have to really be careful because, you know, it's really smooth. I mean, I know you saw me misfire it a couple times, but honestly, that's just because the titanium is so thick. There's so much pressure there. This blade is actually really, you know, really smooth when you close it. So you got to be careful, right? If it has any momentum, you don't want your fingers to be in the way of that blade. There's no doubt in my mind, if that blade just barely contacts you, you are going to get cut. Now, These two here, you know, they still have the factory edge on them, which is not nearly as sharp as the one I put on. So that's just kind of up to you if you actually want to use it, carry it. But no, I mean, I cut things with boxes. I mean, it's almost comical. You're almost like on the tape, you're like getting close to it, and the tape like splits. You know, it's like afraid of the knife. But I really do really like this knife, and I'll just pop these guys open for us here. Got that one. And you know, obviously, I like Medford as a whole. So if you don't like the company or you don't like overbuilt knives, obviously this isn't the one for you. But if you're looking for a flipper and you just kind of want something unique, something different, you know, one of the things I got to tell you is everyone gives me a really hard time about the Medfords, and they go, "Oh, you do realize?" I think, what do the comments say? I don't know, posting online is dumb, but you know, the comments are like, "You do realize you're paying all this money for something that anyone can have." And I get that, but that's why I buy them. Like I said in my last video, I hate the fact, you know, when I was collecting Les Georges, and I've got about 6 of them now, I just, it blew my mind. I'm like, "Hey, Les, can I buy a knife?" "No, man, the books are closed." And then the knives would hit the secondary market, and people want 1,000, 2,000. I have no idea. So, like I said, but it always just fascinated me that either build more knives or charge higher prices so the knife maker gets the money and not these middlemen. I think it's crazy. And so I like the fact that I can go to a store, buy these knives, and yes, I'm paying retail, but it's the retail price for them, and I can choose to buy them or not. I will tell you that all my experiences with Medford have been absolutely positive. It's been a nice company to work with. Sharpening, things that go back. I mean, they get these knives back out to you in 24-hour turnaround. So I know the warranty is kind of, you know, if you like to open up knives, which I do. I've opened up every other one of these knives with the exception of the Medfords because they don't want me to open them. You know, if you have to open your knife, it's not the company for you. But if you just want a flipper that has kind of, honestly, no equal, then I would actually recommend taking a look at the Vyper. Medford is one of those products that you can't judge it online because they're the feel of it. If you just looked at these things and you said, "Hey, this thing costs $1,000. This thing costs $1,000. This thing costs $1,000," you'd be like, "That's crazy." It's like, you know, if you didn't know anything and you saw a Rolex versus a you know, a Citizen watch, and one of them is 10,000 and one of them is, I don't know, $200, it's hard to get a judge. So like I said, I'd highly recommend feeling one, putting one in your hands. You know, this is actually going to be a knife that I carry around quite a bit. I'm used to carrying it. It doesn't bother me, and I feel like this knife is just fun and aggressive. One of the negatives I will say on this knife only, I forgot to mention it, and these knives here don't have it. They've engineered it out, I think, is if you take a look at this, is that look how far back that detent ball is. And that is because of the geometry. So it's on the floor, gotta be careful not to cut myself. So right here, the detent ball falls off, but there's still quite a bit of room that you have to go to get that blade to lock. And for some reason, and I don't know if they changed the geometry on this, the new ones don't have it. It has a little bit, but it almost kind of flops right off. So these ones, this one's broken in, so it's smoother. These ones are not as smooth, but this one will often, like I showed you earlier in the video, kind of catch, and I'm trying to do it. At the very end, do that and catch, and you have to be sure, because this is not locked out. The ball has fallen off, but it hasn't locked out yet. You have to give it that little extra wrist action to get it. So the new ones, if you're buying a brand new one, that's not going to be an issue for you. They've engineered it out, but the old ones, it definitely, or at least this particular knife has that. Another thing on these knives, and I forgot to mention, is I don't know what they call this, but this is obviously on the outside. This one is on the inside, so I don't know why they changed that. I can't tell you if that looks better or worse or anything like that, but they've obviously decided to make that change. And then for some odd reason, for whatever reason, they changed the clip. This one has 1 screw, this one has 2 screws, but that's basically it. I'd imagine if I wanted to, and I haven't decided, because the problem I have when I collect knives is I buy these knives and I know, like, I have all the intent in the world to cut things and open things with them, but just knives like this, they just look so good, so I have a hard time actually putting them in my pocket. But if I do decide to use them and break them in, I'm sure they'll break in just as well. This one broke in really nice, and it just becomes kind of second nature to flick it. When I don't give it wrist, I actually have to concentrate on not giving it wrist. It almost like wants the kind of the way it's designed. It kind of is designed for you to give it wrist. But that's kind of my review. It's an awesome knife, and quite frankly, if you ever get in a defensive situation, honestly, which one would you rather have? You know, don't get me wrong. This is a Wilson Combat. This one's awesome. And it disappears in your pocket, but you know, let's be honest here. I'd rather have that one. All right, guys. Well, thanks for watching. If you have any other questions, please let me know. But I'd encourage you guys to get out there, and thanks for watching my video. All right, bye.